Keir Giles. Keir, very good evening to you. Welcome to the Independent Republic. Thanks for joining us. There's a lot of noise going on around the Ukraine situation at the moment, a lot of it coming out of Ukraine. I've spoken to quite a few military experts who seem to think that they're worried that Ukraine's actually losing at the moment and could lose by the end of this year.
Well, that's certainly the way that things are going if this holdup of USAID actually continues for very much longer, because they stepped on the hose that was actually keeping Ukraine supplied with what it needed to resist the Russian onslaught. Now, there's no doubt at all that Ukraine will fight on, because they're faced with a choice of fighting or coming under that savage Russian military occupation that is blighting the lives of so many people in the occupied territories. And other countries are stepping up, of course. The UK and other countries around Europe are now doing what they can very belatedly to try and fill the gap that's been left by the United States. But there was one thing that's very interesting in that clip from the interview with Olena Zelenska that you just played. She was asked by Piers Morgan to state the case to Americans. Why does it matter to Americans that this money should go to Ukraine or to fund the US defense industry to support Ukraine? And that, unfortunately, is a message that isn't getting through loud and clear enough. Why this matters not just in Ukraine itself, but actually for the whole of the West. I think that's something that really gets lost in some of the noise over the horrific casualties and the murders of innocent civilians in Ukraine, that it's not just them that are at risk.
Yeah. Is it a case of sort of battle fatigue, do you think, in terms of the way that people have such a short attention span now? Because not only has it been going on for 2 years, but there's also now another conflict which appears to be, you know, sort of raising people's heckles even more in Gaza. So I guess people maybe have taken their eyes off Ukraine and they don't really see an end to it.
It's a factor, of course, and yes, it has helped Putin enormously that the whole Gaza situation has erupted and diverted not just attention, but also aid from Ukraine. But we shouldn't confuse what publics think and what the media are saying with what's actually being done by governments and particularly by militaries across the West. Even in the United States, you've got this block on aid in Congress, and you've even had this timid approach by the White House, even when the aid was flowing, putting restrictions on what Ukraine could actually do with it. But in those parts of the government that actually understand clearly what the threat is from Russia, there was much greater willingness always to keep things moving and to keep Ukraine supported, because they know that that keeps the threat from Russia further away. And it's the same across a lot of European countries. While the public might be diverted, there are plenty of other people who are actually understanding fully precisely what is at risk here, and of course doing everything that they can to try to support Ukraine, keep it functioning as a state, keep the Russians further away from us.
And do you see an end to any of this? I mean, what's your prognosis as to what happens over the next 6 months?
Well, we really shouldn't rule out surprises, because if there's one thing that we've seen over and over again during the course of this war, it's Ukraine pulling something unexpected out of the hat and changing the course of the conflict completely unexpectedly. Now, that static line on the map, that front line that doesn't appear to have moved very much in months, is a little bit confusing and a little bit distracting from the fact that Ukraine has actually achieved some substantial successes elsewhere, not on land, but clearing the Black Sea of the Russian Navy so that it can reopen its trade routes, which is absolutely vital to continuing to function as a state. The enormous successes that it's had in knocking out large parts of the Russian Air Force when it comes to close to the front line. Again, massively outnumbered in the air, a country without a navy, but yet achieving all of these strategic successes. That's something which we shouldn't overlook when considering how this conflict may go over the next few months.
There was a weird story a few days ago about some German army officials sort of mistakenly or by accident releasing information on what may or may not have been a British operation in Ukraine. How important was that? I mean, is it one of those things that sort of everybody knew but nobody said anything about? We've always been told by our Ministry of Defence here in the UK that there are no British troops in Ukraine. So I'm not sure I want to even ask you the question, but what do you make of it?
Well, that whole German story about this release of information, whether you're talking about Chancellor Scholz or the German Air Force call just a few days ago that's been intercepted by the Russians and played to the world, it's sadly, it doesn't make Germany look like a serious security partner. Both the hesitancy with which Germany has been dragging its heels over supporting Ukraine, and now apparently they're not taking seriously keeping information that should be confidential secret and protecting it properly. It really doesn't inspire confidence. As for who is in Ukraine, I'm surprised to hear that the British MOD is saying that there's nobody there. I was always under the impression that there were, in fact, advisors from not just the UK, but other countries, notably not the United States for an extended period, but actually in Ukraine, or in a variety of roles, obviously not the ground troops that have been ruled out by so many European leaders in response to French President Macron saying this was an option. But still, I would assume people are there, and I'm surprised to hear they're not.
Okay. Keir, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Keir Giles there from Chatham House with his take on the latest situation. As I say, Piers Morgan's interview with the wife of Vladimir Zelensky, Mrs. Zelenska, coming up on Piers Morgan Uncensored. You can